adaptação grande a este tempo e realçar aqui, de alguma forma, para os colegas do IPC que estão presentes, o esforço que foi feito por todos e, a meu ver, com grande sucesso de adaptação a uma nova realidade e a disponibilidade que todos têm tido de fazer esta adaptação, que não é fácil para muitos de nós, mas isso, quanto a mim, tem sido feito com sucesso. E por outro lado, agradecer em particular à Susana e aos elementos da comissão organizadora pelo empenho que têm posto nesta organização e também nas outras iniciativas no âmbito do CINEP e que também vão mudando e se vão adaptando, e agora uma iniciativa que tem um lançamento ativo a partir do dia 5 de outubro, mas que está pensada há muito tempo atrás e antes até da pandemia, mas que tem também uma atualidade muito forte neste momento e que pode ajudar os colegas e toda a comunidade a evoluir também na sua forma de trabalho. Por outro lado, também agradecer a disponibilidade que a Susana tem tido de liderar algumas iniciativas menos formais e importantes também do ponto de vista da formação do nosso corpo docente e das iniciativas do ponto de vista pedagógico, que são tão importantes para a nossa melhoria de desempenho. Portanto, agradecer a todos os colegas esta disponibilidade, porque todos o fazem de uma forma pro bono e abdicando de algum tempo que teriam para outras iniciativas. E, por outro lado, também agradecer a disponibilidade de todos os participantes no seminário como conferencistas, pela partilha dos seus conhecimentos, das suas experiências e que, pela sua diversidade, são, sem dúvida, muito importantes para toda a comunidade do IPC e para toda a comunidade que está presente neste simpósio. Por outro lado, realçar um aspecto que pode ser importante, que é, neste momento, no início do simpósio, temos 90 participantes, o que é, sem dúvida, uma possibilidade diferente que leva à participação de muitos colegas pelo facto de não terem que se deslocar e de poderem, no conforto do seu espaço de trabalho, participar e acompanhar as sessões de acordo com o seu interesse e de acordo com a sua disponibilidade. Portanto, desejar a todos um ótimo simpósio e, mais uma vez, agradecer a toda a comissão que organizou este evento o empenho e a dedicação em manter esta iniciativa de pé e sempre atual nos temas e nas abordagens que preconiza para cada ano. Portanto, muito boa tarde e desejo de um bom simpósio.
Muito obrigada. So we are now moving to English language, which is the working language for the two sessions today, the keynote speech right now, and then the panel session. I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker this year, and I want to thank him, James Pickering, for accepting our invitation for this keynote. Before giving him the floor, I will use a few minutes to introduce him. James Pickering is a professor of anatomical education at University of Leeds. His areas of expertise are anatomy education, digital education, curriculum design and evaluation. He is a multi-award winning teacher and higher education researcher, and he has considerable experience in designing and evaluating innovative approaches to blended learning. This record of accomplishment of innovative practice has enhanced the learning experience of students at both University of Leeds and higher education institutions around the world. James is the lead educator of the hugely popular MOOC on human anatomy delivered on the Future Learn platform. This course, the first anatomy MOOC in the world, attracted a higher number of learners and received outstanding feedback. In recognition of his sustained record, James has received numerous national honors, including the Learning Technologist of the Year Individual Award, the Times Higher Education Most Innovative Teacher of the Year Award, and he has received the National Teaching Fellowship in 2017. Most recently, he has developed the university's approach to student-centered active learning in the context of hybrid delivery. His keynote today will focus on his teaching and scholarship activities that try to understand student engagement in a meaningful sense and maintain this engagement in circumstances of hybrid teaching delivery as the ones we are recently employing as part of the response to COVID-19. So, James, the floor is yours, and thank you once more for your contribution to our symposium.
No worries at all. Thank you, Susanna, for that very, very kind introduction. It's nice to be here in what is otherwise, I think, difficult times for people around the world. So yes, as Susanna alluded to, my talk is really based on some of the practitioner-based research I've done as primarily a teacher in higher education, although my focus is on anatomy education for medical students. A lot of the themes of higher education around motivation, engagement, curriculum design are very transferable into other domains as well. So I won't focus on medical education specifically, but I will draw on some of my own research to really make some wider points about engagement. So first of all, I'm going to share my screen to share my slides. So please do just bob something in the chat if there's a problem. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Yes, I can still see you, Susanna, so please wave or something if something goes wrong, and we can try to fix it, but I'm sure it'll be okay. We're all used to this by now. Okay, so it's nice to be here. Thank you. So my talk, hybrid delivery, maintaining engagement with technology. Like I said, I'd like to draw on a lot of my experience, kind of teaching lots of students and just understanding what it's like to be a kind of very much a coal-face teacher and kind of having that anecdotal experience, but also having done some educational research in trying to screw down and really work out what is going on, and use that information to inform our curriculum design. So really, the word engagement has always been a word to me that needs unpicking. I think people use the word engagement without fully appreciating that there's lots of different dimensions to it. And what does this word engagement actually mean? Because I think for a lot of people, and this can go into some educational theory, which will touch upon arguments between cognitivism and constructivism and their view of engagement. But what does engagement actually mean? What does this word mean? So I think that's important when we're trying to think about designing curricula. Normally, when we're on campuses, but also designing curricula when we're having to do it through the medium of technology a lot more, online teaching, so to speak. So if you just pull out a definition from Education Glossary, I just found this, they're pretty similar if you Google definition of kind of student education and engagement. Just this one, it says, which I think does summarize pretty much what people mean. In education, student engagement refers to the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that students show when they are learning or being taught. And this extends the level of motivation they have to learn and progress in their education. I don't think anyone is really going to dispute that. I don't think anyone's really going to pick that apart and disagree with it. But I think there's an opportunity to perhaps try and explore in more detail what this actually means in a practical sense. And by that I mean, by understanding what this means and different elements to it, we could then put in place different strategies, different approaches to supporting our students progress. So I just find it quite interesting, this aspect of engagement. And again, yes, drawing a little bit on the medical education literature here, but it is something you see across the piece when we're talking about higher education and words like engagement, motivation. We have this kind of overriding view that somehow nowadays students are different. I think we've kind of finally put to bed the idea that we have students, as it says here in this piece, a well-known journal, a high impact factor journal that reaches lots of different practitioners across the globe, making various assertions, which I think now we've debunked. The idea that we have these students who are digital natives, purely by having growing up with technology, they intuitively know how to use it. I would dispute that. I'd say the literature doesn't necessarily support that simplistic view. Also, that students that were born after a certain point in time have specific characteristics. In a previous world, we'll call that pigeonholing, which I didn't think was necessarily the best thing to do. And I think, okay, we do have students which are coming into higher education, who are already into higher education, who have had different exposures, will have different skill sets from those who came in a decade before. But I don't think that is sufficient to mean we have to justifiably just blanketly change how we deliver our education. There's other points in this abstract, and it is just one abstract, but it is, I think, representative. I could have used several other keynote abstracts, several other kind of letters, several other papers that have been published. They like working in teams. They thrive in collaborative environments. Okay, these may be good skills that we want our students to have, but that doesn't mean that we need to teach everything to them through this approach. They are accustomed to finding information online. That's a minefield, and there's various papers out there that can dispute the validity of, say, YouTube and other online resources in being the most ideal places to go to if they're wanting to on their own, personalize their own learning. Learn best from visually appealing content. Well, like I said previously, I think we've put to bed the idea that there's learning styles as a type of pedagogy that keeps them engaged. What does that mean? Keeps them engaged. What, it keeps them happy? It keeps them motivated? It keeps them kind of asking questions? It keeps them knowledgeable to pass their assessments? What does that word engage there actually mean? It seems to refer to they're able to concentrate. So they need to have videos which are longer than 10 minutes. Well, unfortunately, the keynote I've been given lasts for 45 minutes. So perhaps I'll stop in 5 because you'll have lost interest. Perhaps you'll do that naturally, or perhaps I can keep you engaged with what I have to say. Hopefully it is the latter, not the former. I can't find a single piece of robust evidence that has ever done any experiments, interventions in student education that can say it is 10 minutes. And why is it 10 minutes? Do you know, I think 10 minutes is quite a nice round number. You know, if you're doing an experiment, you usually find it's maybe 11.5 minutes or something, but it's always 10 minutes, isn't it? It just seems too straightforward. Where there is that question, then investigate. And I have, like I said, not been able to find any empirical evidence to support that assertion. Please, if you have that paper in your Mendeley account, pop it in the chat and I'll have a look later on. The traditional lecture will quickly lose the attention of many of these students, and an unengaged student is not learning. An unengaged student is not learning. Again, that's quite a bold statement to make. So I think over the next 40 minutes or so, maybe a bit shorter, so we can have an opportunity for some questions. Just like to not necessarily have a bias. Everyone has their own inherent biases, of course, but not automatically to just assume a position, but to appreciate that there's different angles one can take, and you have to select those different approaches, understanding what these mean in designing the curriculum. So I was interested in this. I was interested in this because we have a lot of conversations in our university about different approaches. And I wanted to know, really, within my discipline, what the evidence base for a lot of these were. Or as the title says there to this slide, are we actually looking for it? Are we actually looking for the answers to understand what is happening in regard to student learning, engagement, motivation, etc.? Evaluation is an important part of student education, I believe. I think we should be evaluating our own delivery, making enhancements, appreciating that it's not ideal, appreciating that it cannot be replicated like a basic science laboratory would. It's not as simple as that. There isn't a silver bullet to all these interventions, but I think we do need to understand more so we can make more joined up thinking, more joined up approaches to our educational delivery. Myself and a colleague from University of Liverpool in the UK published this evaluation framework. Don't need to go into too much detail, but essentially there are different elements to it which allows us to understand the level of evaluation that is going on. And I appreciate this may sound a slight sidestep for the talk and the title of the talk, but I do think it's important. And if you want to find the results, which I'll talk about over the next couple of slides, then we published this paper, I think it was maybe 18 months ago, on how comprehensive. So how much detail are we going into when we are researching the use of, in this case, technology, which is important for what I'm about to say. So what we did is you got the usual Prisma diagram there, and we actually scrutinized by eventually having 153 papers from this literature. We selected using the various appropriate keywords, which you can please go to the paper and interrogate. We were left with 153 papers, and of those 153 papers, we scrutinized them for essentially how their intervention had been evaluated. One of the criteria was that it was evaluated against student satisfaction, so essentially using end of module, end of intervention surveys, those happy sheets, Likert-based scales. We also had a criteria which is, was the educational intervention looked at for kind of pure learning gains, so taking outside of a formal teaching environment and just assessed as if it was in a laboratory setting. Two there, which is learner impact. So that is how having this intervention enhance their progress through the course. And then finally, which we don't need to dwell on at the moment, but institutional impact, the impact these interventions had. So what did we find? In summary, we found that the vast majority of the studies that were evaluating the impact of an educational intervention was evaluating it by the way of a happy sheet. They were essentially saying to students, did you like this intervention? Fill out this Likert scale, and here are the results. And then we as faculty members take that in and go, yes, surprise, surprise, shock horror. We gave them a nice shiny toy and the students liked using it. That simplifies it. That's probably been a little bit unfair for the agenda those colleagues were taking in, but generally I think you understand my point. There was, again, at the end, 1A and 2, that is looking at the impact these interventions had on learning outcomes at the end of a module. And that is in itself quite a difficult thing to do, because a student is not necessarily just engaging in one single resource that you provide to them to progress through the course. So it becomes mixed, it becomes complicated. There's lots of variables in there which you cannot control. But the take-home message from this piece of work for myself and colleagues was very much that a vast majority of the evaluation into educational enhancements, yes, within my discipline, but I think it broadly is representative because we couldn't find much elsewhere within other disciplines, is that these educational interventions are being looked at, evaluated at quite a superficial level. I don't mean to say that as a criticism, not at all. I think it's an honest reflection of what many teachers who are interested in doing this research are faced with in terms of workload and being able to balance this all together with their, like I said, their teaching workload. But to me, I think this picture kind of summarizes that very nicely. What we have here is we have someone walking home one night in the dark, and they are looking for their keys. If many people have seen this picture before, they're looking for some keys to get back into their apartment, back into their house, and they've lost them on the way perhaps back from a cafe or a pub or somewhere. And they're looking under a light to see if they can find those keys. And a policeman walks past, can't see it in this picture, and the policeman says, "What's the matter? What are you looking for? What is wrong?" And he says, I'm looking for my keys." And he said, "Well, where did you where did you lose your keys? And he goes, oh, I lost them over there. And you can see the key behind the gentleman. He goes, well, why aren't you looking over there? He goes, because this is the easiest place to look. And to me, that summarizes, just because evaluation surveys, questionnaires are easy to do, we may be able to find something, but we are missing much more than what is actually going on. So I think that's important when we come to look at engagement, because we need to learn a lot more about what engagement means. And we need to use the most appropriate methods to see if we can unpick engagement. Because by understanding what engagement means in this context, we can then put some interventions in place. We can put some curriculum interventions in place to support our learners. The idea of engagement you'll be familiar with has recently, in my view, been conflated very much with constructivist principles of teaching. Nothing wrong with that. Constructivist principles of teaching, I think we all know generally what they are. One that kind of removes this teacher-led teaching into a more student-focused, student-centered, group work, collaborative, sharing of experience activities. And that's fine. In my view, I think we need to, again, unpick it slightly more. Because actually what I see happens is that actually this approach to then student-centered learning, collaborative group work learning, becomes synonymous with active learning. And I have some issues with these definitions. If anything, the end of this talk will be one of definitions and making sure we know what we are all talking about. Active learning then becomes flipped classrooms. You've got this traditional approach, which we know in the literature exists. We don't need to go into what a flipped classroom is. But generally making learning kind of less sage on a stage, less me talking to you as students, and more collaborative. That's kind of increasing aspects of fun within the classroom, which can link to various kind of emotional activities. But like I said, this is kind of collaborative group work, discovery learning, so to speak. And this was supported very much by a very prominent paper that was published quite a while ago, may even be 10 years ago now, in PNAS. Active learning increases student performance in science, engineering, and mathematics. A lot of work was being done in STEM. And this, as we can see here, was to test the efficacy of constructivist, this is words taken directly from the paper, to test the efficacy of constructivist versus exposition-centered or teacher-centered course design. And they looked at student outcomes when different classes were using active learning techniques. And they can see the results from that study. If you're familiar with them, you may familiar with the study, you may already know this, but student performance improved significantly on assessment and concept inventories after active learning. Improvement approximately 6%, which is going to be quite a significant enhancement in learning. We're talking about the difference between pass, fail, difference between A grades, B grades. That's a real significant performance there. And students are 1.5 times more likely to fail if they're in traditional lecture versus active learning. Now that's fantastic. And I think I have seen on many occasions that story told. Active learning conflated with engagement, conflated with flipped classrooms as this constructivist way of teaching. And I would just like to explore that with this sentence. This was pulled out of the work on their definition of what active learning is. Active learning interventions varied widely in intensity and implementation and included approaches as diverse as occasional group problem solving, which I'd say is very constructivist an approach from what we've said, worksheets or tutorials completed during class, or personal response systems with or without peer instruction, and studio or workshop course designs. Now, I don't particularly have an issue with any one of those. All of those will have a role in course design. All of those will have a role in student engagement, whichever part of engagement you would like to look at. But actually, group problem solving is very different from personal response system. And to me, active learning can, yes, summarize both of those, but it actually is talking to, in my view, two different things. And they are the things we need to understand so we can inform our curriculum design. We know that from flipped classrooms, but in fact, what does the flipped classroom literature tell us? Flipped classrooms have been around for many years now, so we have some large scale meta-analyses. We can see here that 15% of studies reported in this paper from computers and education showed a positive impact on motivation and engagement. 8% of students came to class better prepared, and 50% of studies report students earn higher grades. They do make reference in the paper to the fact of publication bias could actually support some of these more positive implications. And that can be seen in this study, where you've got the top line results there in the first 2 bullet points. But the third one to me is deeply important. Impact of flipped classrooms on changes in knowledge and skills. The effect sizes ranged from minus to this approach is helping our students learn less, to a positive outcome. And to me, again, it is all about trying to understand what we are trying to do here. I think a lot of what's happening in flipped classrooms is very much tutor-led, facilitator-led. We know teaching is difficult. And to do a flipped classroom, I think, takes a lot of skill and practice and rehearsal. And I think you can put constructivist, whatever, to bed. The skill of the practitioner in that classroom will be one of the most significant determining factors of its success. So we have active learning, increases student performance, as I said. But just to draw your gaze away from that more problem solving, there are those personal response systems that are present within this catch-all of active learning, which does then deviate away. Because a lot of those, and forgive me, the next slide is very busy, so maybe have a glance away and then reintroduce yourself to it. A lot of work has been done from colleagues in Rhode Island, in the States, that have developed the Learning Scientists website. Hopefully many of you will be familiar with that. And one of them they talk about is retrieval practice. I hope many of you are familiar with retrieval practice. And this very much draws on the cognitivist side of things, drawing on the principles of cognitive load theory, as is dual code there as well, about image design and presentation. And retrieval practice is very much one with personal response systems. Yet that is based on not a constructivist, where you can have this conflation of active learning in that sense. That active learning PNAS paper from STEM was talking about active learning to try and look at constructivist versus teacher-led, when actually one of the methodologies they've used as active learning is a very cognitivist approach, which I'm not saying is necessarily a teacher-led one, but it's not necessarily a constructivist one. I think what they're trying to say is that anything other than a sage on the stage, a didactic lecture, is active learning. And I would probably agree. And they're getting caught up, in my view, with this catch-all of constructivism. I think everyone, your most ardent cognitivist teachers, would say anyone standing behind a podium talking to your lecture slides for 40 minutes is going to drive any student crazy. And if we want to develop motivation, that is probably not the thing to do. There's lots of resources there that, like I say, do draw on that more cognitivist approach, but to me would still be classed as active learning. Excuse me. Okay, so I have this opinion, I have this view. I've come to this view by trawling the literature, and this is kind of where I am. And that's very well and good. But actually, our students in our courses are ours. And it's difficult sometimes to necessarily pull things that you hear from the literature developed from a different institution, from a different cohort of students, and apply it to your students. So what we've done in Leeds, and what I've done specifically with some of my students, is try to develop that evidence base locally by doing some local experiments, some local interventions, measuring their impact, and then using that information to design the curriculum for our students. So very much developing a local evidence base. And I'd like to give you 3 different examples that all link to supporting student engagement. At the end of it, hopefully we'll have a better understanding of what engagement is, and then I can give you some ideas about our approaches at Leeds that I've been developing in regard to our hybrid delivery. So quickly, I'll go over these quite quickly. There's some papers and references in there. I can happily share those papers with Susanna afterwards and disseminate them if you'd like some more information, and we hopefully have some time at the end for some questions. So again, contradicting myself perhaps, but drawing on the use of students and technology, I think they're all used to Facebook. So let's try and meet them in that space. There are obviously some concerns with that. Not all students want to be on Facebook. They don't want to share that public profile. And we did make that abundantly clear to them at the beginning. And also we told them that we wouldn't have our own personal accounts as teachers on there. But it was a snapshot to say, look, here is a resource that we're kind of climbing on over the fence onto your side of the tennis court, so to speak, to try and help you have a communication channel with us as your teachers, to try and engage with you and prepare you for your assessments. Medical students do get very anxious about their very high stakes assessments. Here we've just got some graphs which essentially are, you've got spot 1 and spot 2 here. These are just assessments, so they're end of module exams. And here we have the course duration in days. And here we have in these dots, the number of comments that were made by individual students. And obviously there's no surprise that as those comments, as those assessments approach, so the volume of comments for both of their 2 assessments, both they increase as well. And what did we find? Well, we found that, sorry, I'm moving my Zoom gallery around so I can see that. What did we find? That if you actually engaged with the platform, if you engaged with the Facebook site and asked a comment, you significantly did better in your assessment. You significantly performed better in your assessments if you put a comment on the Facebook site, and we'll explore various reasons for that later on. But you can see 79.4% versus 71% there. Nearly a 10% difference for those students who went onto the Facebook site, posted a comment, got an answer, and then moved away. And that's interesting. To me, that's really interesting, because what that means is all of the students in the year would have seen that comment and that answer. So what was it about those students who put the comments on that made such a difference? Because all of the students in the cohort who had engaged, and there was a high number of them who engaged, these are the numbers who just put a comment, would have seen the questions and the responses. We were interested by that. And just a couple of questions, a couple of comments here typify some broader qualitative comments from the students. It did reduce anxiety, not the focus of this conversation, but seeing what another person had posted and realize you didn't know the answer yourself. So they didn't know what other students in their year both knew the answer to the question, and in some instances that they needed to know that bit in the first place. It gave me slight short-term anxiety when I saw the questions I was not aware of. It gave me confidence overall when I was relieved to have come across it to make I was covering that information that was needed. So it was reassuring to those students that they finally knew what they needed to know. And this is something that we kind of just categorized into this table here. And I think anyone that's familiar with, the last 15 years or whatever it was, Donald Rumsfeld, the US Defense Secretary, said this unknown kind of idea about perhaps an incident that we don't need to go into as much, but they kind of coined that phrase. These known knowns on one instance and these unknown unknowns. And here we've categorized it. In red, they're aware of the content in the curriculum. And then actually, once you know what's in the curriculum, you then have to go and know that specific piece of content. So I know I need to know about the lobes of the brain. And now I know there are X number of lobes in the brain. And you can see there is that transition from not knowing what you need to know, and therefore not knowing it, all the way to knowing what you need to know and knowing it. And to me, this was about cognitive engagement. These students were cognitively engaged with the course. They knew what they needed to know, and then they went and learnt it. And here you can see with those different categories of students, with time and their level of cognitive engagement along this left-hand side, if they're getting to that, I know what I need to know, and I know it, their performance in assessments will be higher. And some of that data supports that. I'll move on quickly, I'm conscious of time. We also have drawing screencasts here. These are the classic traditional chalk and talk type situations that you do very much in a classroom setting, but let's do it on a tablet. Let's put it on YouTube. Let's make it flexible for students to engage with. Let them do it on their mobile phones where it's accessible. They can use it as self-directed resources. And actually, they quite like the idea that one of their tutors is talking to them on YouTube on their smartphone as they're getting the bus into class. These was very much drawn, this approach, drawing screencasts, there where you slowly develop the image. We're going from A, B, C, D here. It's just an anatomical structure. It's not what important it is. It could be how to use a piece of computer software, for example. And this is very much drawing on, I'm not going to go into this in any more detail, the cognitive load theory, and how you're slowly chunking up pieces of content to make capacity of in the working memory optimized. And that supports information going into the long-term memory, which can then be retrieved upon later on. Richard Mayer will come back to in a moment, has done lots of work on this, and there's various principles, which again, we don't need to talk about right now. But fundamentally, it's using this approach to support the students engaging with a resource that is helping them cognitively to understand the content. It's an awareness of their brain architecture, taking advantage of how it works to develop resources accordingly. We did some experiments to compare this, and again, there's a paper which you can go and look at, but comparing textbook with screencast, we found that students learned more with pre-test and post-test methodology. They learned more with these screencasts than textbooks for a longer period of time, which you can see that there. I won't go into too much detail of the data. Again, there's papers that you can go and have a look at. And then finally, we looked at engagement again, because, you know, there's a thing about engagement. It's used a lot. We need to understand it. And this time we looked at some various engagement scales that are already existing within the literature. We drew on some, perhaps some familiar colleagues there that you'll be aware of, their work on engagement. We developed our own scale because we couldn't find one that slightly worked. And we exposed this to our students who had used a range of blended learning resources to see, again, investigating the different types of engagement. We then used principal component analysis as a form of exploratory factor analysis to try and discern the different aspects of engagement. These were the items. After that process, some details at the bottom, we can see which items were left out. And you can see that if you're not familiar with factor analysis, essentially you have this scale, you have this survey, this group of items, students respond, and via Likert, strongly agree, strongly disagree, they respond, and then the statistical methodology clusters all of those items into themes. So how students answer the same questions similarly, they group them into themes, and then you cluster them together. So we found here with the results that we had a group of questions that all resembled the same theme. We had one here, which you can see, enjoy, like, look forward. To us, that was very much about satisfaction, as it says in the top right-hand corner. This cluster of questions, I set myself goals, I plan my learning. These are all about goal setting and planning, being aware, and to me, that sounded like cognitive engagement again. And then finally, we had physical interaction. This was the weakest of the, statistically, this was the weakest of the factors. So we're less confident with this, but as I'll come to in a moment, it did speak to a type of engagement, which is a very kind of behavioral one. They are physically engaged with these. They are making notes. They are listening carefully. They are considering what is going on. They are kind of working with the resources that we provide. So to us, I'll just go through this quickly. There were 3 different types of engagement we had. First of all, we had satisfaction. We then had goal setting and planning, and then we had physical interaction. And to us, that very much sat with, we have emotional engagement, we have cognitive engagement, and we have behavioral engagement. So now when people are talking about what does engagement mean, we have those three different dimensions to it. And understanding those means we can then put in place different strategies that engage our students on different levels throughout their learning journey. So we were interested in that final engagement aspect. Did any of that actually have any impact on assessment? Did engagement, so to speak, have any impact on assessment? Do the students who are more engaged do better in their assessments? The answer from our study was quite disappointingly no, they don't, which is a little bit disappointing, but there you go. We found that you've got factor 1, which you can see here, factor 1, so there's no correlation. We've got factor 2, there's no correlation. Factor 3, there was no correlation. So what am I saying is that students who scored highly in all of those factors, they were most engaged, didn't correlate with their assessment scores. Now that could be for a number of reasons. Medical students are not the most typical of students because they're in a very high stakes course. So the baseline level of engagement for those students is quite high anyway, but there we go. The reason I talk about this is because links to engagement is always moved into the, is it the best proxy for learning? Are students who are engaged therefore learning? And this is just drawn out from a paper that again is talking about the constructivist teaching fallacy, which is, I think, is a little bit unfair perhaps in this context, just to put it into constructivism from what we've said. But it's moving on that actually these active learning approaches are not necessarily synonymous with enhanced learning outcomes. We need to know a little bit more. We need to unpick what this engagement is actually telling us. And what we're left with is actually a bit of a mixed picture. We have lots of things going on. There's not one approach that works for all. There are lots of different ways forward. It's a bit of a mosaic. There's lots of different individual bits that we need to try and pull together. I don't think anyone could argue with this, which is what we simply want with our students. We want them to be knowledgeable in their specific discipline. We want them to be able to work as teams, to collaborate, critique, and share ideas. We want them to be able to disseminate their knowledge and their best practice. And we want them to be able to listen to and learn from feedback. Also, we want them to continue to develop as individuals and make those meaningful contributions to society. I think that's simple. So, to get them from coming into our universities to then leave with those outcomes, I think we need to understand their levels of engagement. We need to understand how they're cognitively, behaviorally, and emotionally engaged with our course, so we can then apply the appropriate interventions. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we've looked at kind of flipped classroom or an active lecture. Not active learning, not getting rid of the lecture, but bringing the best bits of all of that mosaic into our teaching. And there's just some ideas here. There's editing the slides to make sure you're taking advantage of cognitive load theory. There's redesigning those slides and making sure the context for those slides is relevant. The students know what they need to know, so make sure they're clear and explicit beforehand. Develop supporting materials like those screencasts I showed you that can go alongside, blended, a mixture, rather than everything being flipped. Maybe have a catch-up session at the beginning of interventions to make sure every student in the room is on the same page. There is always a risk with group work that you have dominating figures in the room who may have incorrect knowledge, but they dictate the discussion incorrectly. So make sure everyone is on the same page. And if you're going to utilize suitable technology, not just using it for its own sake. Okay, so that's a whistle-stop tour of my kind of view of engagement. I'm sure it opens up some critique. I'm sure it opens up more questions than it does answers. And I think that's a good thing as we try and learn more about student engagement and what it actually means. Also bearing in mind that we're never actually going to understand fully, I think, what it means. But we want students to have those qualities on the left of the screen. We know who our students are. We have our admission criteria. We know their demographic. We know who they are. But how do we go about, especially in this time of hybrid delivery, how do we go about supporting them? And actually, to support them, I think we need to support colleagues in being able to design their curricula most effectively. So at the University of Leeds, we have developed this Scala approach, student-centered active learning. We've been developing it in response to hybrid delivery. And like it says there, we've got student-centered. I'm not going to talk about that too much. We've taken these words because they're familiarity, but then given them our own definition. So we've got supportive, inclusive, flexible, accessible, community-building curricula. That's just as a given. But within the classroom, we're looking here and we've pulled out some of these key words. Cognitively involved students. They're engaged with diverse content and media and have opportunities to collaborate and participate. So we're drawing on all of that information that we understand in being able to develop that content. We've actually broken it up into learning journey, student support, assessment and feedback, and content delivery. And there's some details there. What we've actually done to support colleagues is give them very simple models of how to deliver. I think one of the concerns is that the pandemic arrived. We had to move our the majority of our teaching online, as I'm sure many other institutions have done as well. But not all of the colleagues are sitting around reading pedagogy textbooks. They're doing what else they do at universities. They do research, they do innovation. You know, not everyone that works in university and higher education that's involved in teaching does understand the nuances of pedagogy. So we had to put this guide in place. We had two very simple models. Model A was essentially the flipped classroom. Essentially the flipped classroom. But here we've given them clear guidance in how to develop it, and we'll come back to that more in a moment. We've got pre-delivery. This can be done asynchronously, so obviously not live. We've got screencasts, video, podcasts, lecture captures, talking heads, content that students engage with. Then they can either do it synchronously or asynchronously, a discuss, share and collaborate session, one of those sessions. We've then got quizzes so they can check their understanding, and colleagues may then want to take their students back and they circuit through this before you then have a wrap up and review or a live Q&A session to get rid of any problems. We have staff engagement that runs throughout this process at specific times to support them. That's one of the models. The second model is essentially the traditional one. This time doing it live, timetabled, collaborative sessions, but making sure within that live session, there is opportunity for discussion, chat, scheduled breaks, and specific tasks. It's not just me, as I'm doing, I suppose, for this presentation, talking to you non-stop for 45 minutes. If you imagine you have one lecture like that, then another, that's quite a morning for many students. Then after that, there is a further opportunity for discussion, either synchronously or asynchronously, live in a session or not. But we've got this path mapped out. The key difference between those two models is what I mentioned. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share, and again, I can send this to Susanna if it would be helpful. This essentially is a guide. It's not fancy. It's not anything special, not wanting to underplay it and the work that colleagues and myself put into it, but it's just a very simple guide that talks you through the university's approach to its delivery. And there's various aspects there that we'll talk about. Maybe just 2 more minutes before I wrap up for questions. We've got learning journey, and what we've got is a series of very clear pieces of advice and how to do it. So provide students with clarity on what is going to be delivered, supporting their cognitive engagement. Provide information on summative and formative assessments. Make sure it's clear that they know what they need to know. Then we've got how you deliver content. We've got tips for asynchronous delivery with narrated PowerPoints, perhaps, synchronous delivery using Padlet, etc., for synchronized discussions. We've got lots of suggestions and practical tips for doing it. We've also included some media design principles, drawing on the work of Meyer, etc. We can see lots here. Modality, segmenting. This guide just went on how you engage with students, refer to comments in the chat so students know their views and questions are being seen. Then we've got the 2 delivery models, and then we have some tips and advice about assessment and feedback. I won't go on, but the resources there that we've handed out to students, to staff, to help develop their curriculum. So then, to finish, we have this very kind of mixed up, jumbled view of what's going on. We've done some normal adaptations to it to support our students. And then we've got some specific guidance, which we've called student-centered active learning, about hybrid delivery, which tries to lay out the definition and then give tangible resources as to how that can be delivered. So apologies, conscious of time, wanted to leave a few for questions. So rushed it slightly at the end. I can forward those documents to Susanna so she can share them with the conference if that is wanted. Susanna, back to you.
Thank you so much, James. This was food for thought. A lot of ideas, very interesting presentation, and a lot of questions, I'm sure, on the side of our audience. So I would give the word to the audience for any questions you might have for James. Meanwhile, just not to have silence, I would like to ask you, James, do you think we have to change our assessment style? Not only change the way how we engage students, not only pedagogy, the methods, how we deliver contents, but assessment too. Do you think?
Yeah, I think we do, actually. I think we do. I'm not always someone who teaches perhaps quite a fact-based curriculum. I'm not one that automatically thinks that open book assessments are the way to go. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I don't think open book assessments work well for certain types of assessment, like multiple choice questions, although I still think there are ways you can get around it. I think, without getting into the weeds of specifics in regarding to assessment, I think the one thing that we should do in relation to this crisis is chunk up our assessment. And I'm not sure what your kind of assessment portfolio is, but we very much have these modules and then a piece of assessment at the end. Mm-hmm. I think, especially where we are and your students are learning online, they're not all on campus necessarily, chunking up the assessment throughout the module, throughout the teaching intervention, allows students to assess their understanding as they go on. And importantly, I think it keeps them motivated. Mm-hmm. I think we're very keen, we're very clear that assessment drives learning. And if that assessment is this big thing at the end, you're not getting that motivation until right at the end. I think we need to chunk up the assessment and allow students to engage in it more regularly. It also means that they know their shortfall and they can go back and reassess their understanding before they move forward. Whether it's open book, it's MCQ, how you go about the actual assessment, I think is a very local decision.
Mm-hmm. That might be the end of final examinations at the end of the semester.
It may well be, yes, it may well be. I suppose the one overriding question is, who are your students? What do you need them to know? And what is the most appropriate way for you to assess them knowing that thing? It's just because the module has always had a 2-hour essay for the last 20 years that the module's been running, doesn't mean it always has to be a 2-hour essay. It could be different. So reevaluating what that assessment portfolio looks like is key, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I would like to know if there's any question from the audience.
If there isn't, I can make one. Susanna?
Sim.
Okay. I'd like to ask you, you referred about the feedback on Facebook and said that, okay, the students with better grades, they were asking questions on Facebook. But so you made a relation that if they make more questions, they have better grades. But were you not too much confident to take that conclusion there? It means they maybe you can just that is just an indicator that the students were already paying more attention and not didn't become more engaged because of the Facebook.
To me, it was very much for them to ask that question in the first place. They had to know what was in the curriculum and what they were needing to know. It wasn't so much that they asked the question, they got the answer and they did well, because it was only those students who commented who did that much better. So what you had is you had the whole group of students, those who knew what they needed to know, asked a question and they got the answer. Now the whole year got the answer to that question, but only those students who asked did better in their assessment, which means they knew what they needed to know. What they didn't know the answer to, they put the question, but all the rest of what they knew, they already knew that answer. So they didn't put a question because they already knew it. Therefore, the other students who just saw the answer, they got that right, but they didn't know what they didn't know. They then didn't correct that, which means they didn't perform as well. That was my conclusion.
It is possible that we have also to teach students how to think and problem solving, maybe design thinking and metacognition. I think it has a lot to do with these concepts, maybe.
Yeah, I think a lot of work needs to go into supporting students how to be effective learners. I think we take it for granted that they leave high school, secondary school, they come to university and they know how best to learn. I think a lot of times they have some bad habits, which we sometimes need to break. So I agree, Susanna, yes.
Yeah. James, it's time now to finish our session. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. I'm sure there are many, but you offered us so much to think about. So thank you so much, James, for being with us. One of us already put on the chat the link for the Scala guide that you mentioned. So I think this is the one. And I've been asked if you could share your presentation. If so, I will put it here on the chat tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll put a OneDrive link in the chat if that works. I'll stay on the call. And okay. I'll just put a OneDrive link in the chat and then everyone can have that.
Thank you so much, James.
No worries. Okay.
It was a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. And I'm going now to give the floor to my colleague, Rui Costa, and Professor Holger Kusse from Germany, who are going to share the next session.
Thank you, Susanna.
So thank you from my side.
So it's a pleasure to present our colleagues from the project INTEP. This is a project of Erasmus capacity building, and it's the objective of this project is to promote teaching and learning centers in Russian and Chinese universities. So today, this afternoon, we have the colleagues from this project, so from mostly our European partners and the Russian partners. And I first would like to present Professor Holger Kusse, that is the coordinator of this project. He is a professor of Slavic linguistics and of the history of Slavic languages. So, Holger, please, if you want to say some words and present the colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Rui, for your introduction. Yes, we have this project calling Enhancing Teaching Practice in Higher Education. It's a collaboration with colleagues from Portugal, as you see, from Germany, from Italy, from England and from Russia and China. And today we have contributions papers from Italy and from Germany and from Russian as well. And we have about 9 papers, so it will be some short introduction in every topic. And we start with a colleague from TU Dresden, so my university, and it's Peggy Germer, and she is a teacher, and but not only a teacher at school, but she is dealing with theoretical problems of education, and is writing a PhD thesis in this field of tandem teaching, and is very involved in this center. You see this on the already on this presentation, a Center for Language Learning, I will call it. And you see what he will present us about digitizing viable alternative routes in lead education for future primary school teachers. What is for us in Germany, and I think so not only in Germany, should be very important. So Peggy, you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much and welcome to everybody. Nice to see you again here. And now I start the short presentation, but without a video function. You heard from Rui that I'm active in LETE, lateral entry teacher education for primary school teacher, and that's why my short presentation deals with ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and necessary virtual activities. The short guideline, can you see at first description of research interest, including research question, as second drawing on a qualitative and quantitative questionnaire. I'm outline and consider on one hand the digital learning, teaching and testing conditions, and at the other hand the technical support and reported experience of lateral entry teacher students. Based on the results, the concept and practices will be adapted and reunite for subsequent semester. The problem statement is clear, I think so. We had the digital summer semester 2020 and maybe will be continued, or we switched into a hybrid form in winter 2020. So we have to think about suitable options for the next step. Let's come to the research questions. Main goal is to know the status quo of good or best virtual practice in teaching, learning and exam, and of course of associated technical support structures for lectures and other stuff. At third, to decide what should be adapted for subsequent semesters. So the special time is a great opportunity, but also a great challenge for university 2.0. And I think effective and successful teaching and learning under these circumstances requires a high level of professional knowledge and skills on both sides. A lecturer needs to be able to recognize what latest student in the age of 25 until 54 know and use. In a very short time, she or he should adapt new tools for teaching and learning on very different level of knowledge on the other side. So the next is the data collections and analysis. We had 103 completely filled questionnaires in LETE, 49 from future primary school teachers and 54 from future secondary school teachers. So at the end will be a comparative analysis, but the semester is going on until 30th of September. So it is only a short result and a first findings. My focus lay on material from primary school teachers because that group has a lot of problems with distance learning. For online questionnaires, we used a TOD tool, Onyx, so-called Onyx, and we published the question by Opal for lead students. It's also a teaching platform hosted by TU Dresden. There are different types of question, open, closed, with range, without, and the analysis is according to Meiring and Kokart's quantitative and qualitative content analysis with computer program MaxQDA. We will start with quantitative analysis and with a selection of demographic question. If we have a look to the slide, with first results, we see that the participants in LATE were mostly women between the age of 25 to 54. And we have, of course, additional information that they were during COVID-19 pandemic at home with children and from far rural regions without stable internet, sometimes with bad technical circumstances and small knowledge in the field of distance learning. That makes it not easier to care about digitalization, but I think it is a great step for them and us into digital age, even only a smart step for mankind. One of the most interesting questions was which digital resources we used last semester. Most of the participants answered, I hope the translation is understandable, audio recorded slides, that mean PowerPoint presentation and the voice of the lecturer in the background. So the students could see again and stop the movie, write something down, and it was possible to regulate the volume. Often in real life sessions, the voice is not so good audible. They don't have to drive to Dresden, and they could the presentation early in the morning or late at night. They found references, good advices, and they had the chance via Opal forum to ask some questions. Most of LATE students loved it because it is very easy to deal with. On the same level are the slide lectures, like by the colleague in Leeds, which were synchronous. Interesting that to deal with podcasts was obviously difficult. Even I think it is easy with a mobile phone, for instance, but maybe they thought too complicated to record voice. Another problem which grows up during semester was a question on which way students from whole Saxony could collaborate with each other and prepare group work presentations. Of course, the Messenger service WhatsApp is a winner, but it's also interesting that most of them used Opal, the own platform hosted by our university. That's not only the point of preferring, but there are a lot of reasons. All LATE students are registered in Opal, all materials on platform Opal. We send and get emails via this platform, and we have a forum to ask and answer. Svetlana Wisniewska, my colleague, will probably talk about it later in detail. All lecturers in my team have to use it because of uniformity for students, and it is important that we are careful and not overwhelm the LATE students with too much digital tools. On third place, of course, is Padlet. It is very easy and comfortable, and it seems it saves the private sphere without camera and voice. A semester cannot end in Germany without exams, so it was important to know which digital forms we used. Top one, written exam in the questionnaire form via Opal, but I myself must criticize it because only closed question in this form for exam practicable for students. To answer on open questions is on virtual form difficult. Too long, you have to wait for an upload and so on. That's why I prefer also take home exams, but I think we have to change the exam criteria. That means double challenge. To use Opal to construct an exam, to know how to collaborate for all these frequently asked questions, the online service point BQL Digital were responsive. more than 50% needed to use. And I thank you, my colleague, Dagmar Oertel from Online Service Point. She also takes part at this conference now. Only a very, very short overview. How looks the support structure? We have online learning modules, workshop, and different trainings for lecturers and students. We have a digital lunch break to ask questions, wiki, online office hour, tutorials, site with best practice examples, a blog, and so on. On the next slide, you find the first findings in qualitative field. You can see first categories or codes, but semester only ends in 6 days, so it is too early to count out. At first, advantages and disadvantages in teaching and learning. About advantages, I told you something. So I underline the opportunities for adaptation and overforming. The participants missed the live chat function in Opal. Our video conference tool, big blue button, is not stable, and students like to have more small applications for training, like Kahoot or Quizlet. It's clear because it is for primary school teacher. In the field of digital exams, only 2 forms were clearly the winner: digital written exam with questionnaire and oral exam. Oral exam means slides, and during presentation will be a monologue, and after that will be a discussion. All the other forms are too complicated and for actually circumstances bad internet, low level of knowledge, no time, big pressure because of teaching at school. Very helpful advices the second career teachers gave to the topic support for subsequent semesters. They need a help before semester started to deal with different tools. They need time, that means no overlap with seminars and lectures or day where they worked at school, and they need a clear structure in Opal. They need to know what is the must-have for distance learning. For instance, headset, programs, capacity, hotspots, and so on. So we have, last but not least, 3 steps into the age of digitalization of University 2.0. First is done. Tools, applications, platforms for academic context, and so on are shown, and everybody knows minimum the name. But at second, we have to change the perspective, not only to search a tool, but we have to look why this methodical tool is great and suitable for this content. And of course, we must look at step 3. We must think about examination. Not only pure cognitive knowledge is important, but also the ways to get knowledge, to process the knowledge, and to transfer the knowledge. Last but not least, don't forget about real life. Look at the last 2 sentences and think about it when preparing lessons. Thank you very much for hearing my presentation, and if any questions, you can write it in the chat. Thank you very much. No? Was muss ich jetzt machen, Dagmar?
So, thank you so much, Peggy, for your first presentation in our panel section. So we have no time to discuss all the presentations, because we have a lot, about 9 presentations from different fields. So we have to go quickly through the presentations. I asked everyone not more than 10 minutes to use. It's a maximum already. And we are going to the next presentation from Marina Vidrevich and Irina Pervuchina. Marina Vidrevich is leading the NTEP project in Yekaterinburg, and she now will tell us a bit about COVID-19 pandemics as a trigger for higher education transformation in Russia. So Marina, it's your word.
Thank you very much, Holger. I'll share screen one moment. Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'll talk very shortly about COVID-19 pandemic as a trigger for the transformation of the higher education system in Russia. This presentation is based on the results of the investigation, which
Pronto,
was...
já sabe o que é. Eu não vou estar... Pronto, agora não estou, eu estou em Coimbra.
Peço desculpa, mas se alguém está com o microfone ligado, pode desligá-lo?
Is it okay? Do you see me?
Yes,
Do you
please.
hear me? Do you see the presentation?
Yes,
okay.
there was someone with the micro on. Please continue.
Okay. This investigation is based on the results of the work which was carried out by 10 Russian leading universities. And this investigation was devoted to the situation with pandemic and its impact on the higher education system. The first months of the pandemic were March and April. All our universities were in very difficult situation. We had instruction of the Ministry of Education, of Higher Education of Russian Federation to move to the distance learning system, and we must say that not all the universities were ready for this transition.
Excuse me.
This transition meant to isolate teachers and students. It was a stress, and the stress test results are as follows. The percentage of infected students and university teachers is lower than the average number of infected people in the country. It's a very important result. By the end of March, more than 80% of the universities switched to distance learning. And more than 1 million training courses were realized simultaneously in online format. What lessons we've received from the transition to online education? The first result is that higher education institutions are very heterogenic, and the risk of further stratification exists. What does it mean? It means that 20% kept training in synchronous mode, 60% switched to distance learning with loss of education quality. It's too much. 20% carried out distance learning without ensuring quality. And the lack of a full-fledged infrastructure for the implementation of distance learning or blended learning. 88% of the universities reported on the availability of learning management systems, but only 45, not more than 45% of the universities actually used it. Next lessons from the transition to online education are, for university, some of them do not have a minimal infrastructure for distant learning. 11% have sufficient digital infrastructure. 15% lost their students. And 30% of students do not have sufficient functional technique. These are students from low-income families. Again, academics coped with the situation, with the stress situation, but they felt psychological discomfort and lack of competences. 20% of academics are over 65. 60% didn't have a learning experience, distance learning experience. 88% are skeptical about distance forms. Near 40% suffer from increased workload, and 20% need help from digital volunteers. But some of the teaching staff, especially young teachers, they found out that they can increase the quality of education. For students, they felt the need for social and psychological support, individual educational pathways, the development of independent work skills, which they didn't have before. Some of them do not consider the distance format less effective. Some of them feel complete satisfaction with online formats. The number of these students decreased. 40% note a lack of communication with teachers.
Marina, u vas ostala si još jedna minuta.
Okay. So I shan't talk much about the situation, so I'll finish with the last slide, two last slide. The result of this investigation is the need to create and implement new approaches to teaching and learning. The same as we do it in our INTEP project, but as far as digital learning is concerned, it means that we need new didactics, new ways of motivation, individualization, interactivity, and student involvement. All the things that we were talking about in our project. And we feel the need for a single educational standard for online education to unify distance learning technologies, methodology, quality control mechanisms, and for completing assignments, including final ones. And the ways which will help to solve these problems in Russia are creation a single online educational standard, electronic textbooks and guidelines. We feel the lack of these instruments, prepare universities for full IT integration. We need to create a friendly distance learning environment for teachers and students, organize teachers' retraining programs, and ensure information security of the structure, technologies, and components of distance learning. It means that we have an opportunity to turn our entire project to distance learning and start it from the beginning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Marina, and I forgot to say, she is from the State University of Economics in Yekaterinburg. And now we are switching to another presentation from Russian colleagues, but not from Yekaterinburg, but from Kazan. And there's a special institute for pedagogy in Kazan, Tatarstan. And Tatiana will present us a paper about advantages and disadvantages of distance education for university staff in Russia.
Good evening, dear colleagues, dear INTEP partners. Hello from Kazan, from Republic of Tatarstan, Kazan. And today our young researchers will make presentations. So Tatiana is welcome.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Can you see my presentation? Do you see my presentation?
Can you hear?
It's very noisy in the background.
Can you hear us?
It's very hard to hear you because of the background noise. I don't know what it is. Okay, then go further. If it's not possible to stop it, I think we should.
I think it will be very difficult to listen to them with this noise. I suggest that Tatiana connects with me through another meeting, and we try to solve this. And meanwhile, maybe the next speaker can start.
And now, can you hear me?
Yeah, then we go to now from Kazan to Germany, and I hope within the next 30 minutes they solve this problem with the noise in the background. And we have a presentation from Stiftung University Hildesheim in Germany about reconnecting the discourse through adaptive teaching practices. It's from Beatrix Cześ, she's professor for intercultural communication, and Melissa Lazarus, she's writing a PhD thesis in this field.
Okay, thank you so much. And as we don't have much time, I will go directly into our topic. Reconnecting discourse through adaptive teaching practices. Which kind of discourse do we want to reconnect? As we have seen already in the presentation from Peggy Germer, it seems to be apparently rather easy to adapt pure content learning to digital environments. You can have a screencast, you can have audio recorded slides, and it's rather easy to transform content into the digital environment. But we all have some kind of picture about an ideal seminar that consists of a vivid oral discussion. And the learning outcome there should be some kind of explorative learning, argumentation, analytical skills, and so on. Could we go to, yeah. But to be honest, connecting or having a discourse is already rather difficult in face-to-face constellations, in class lectures. It's rather difficult to engage students in discussions. But the video-based communication seems to make it almost impossible due to technical reasons. So I don't know what kind of experiences you made during the last months, but on my behalf, I often had students in my seminars who told me that they can't switch on their microphone or their camera because they don't have the technical environment for that. And the lack of paraverbal, nonverbal communication, the lack of back-channeling behavior also made it very difficult to encourage students in a discussion in the classroom. So just to have a short look at that, this is a screencast or a screenshot from the video conference tool we used at the University of Hildesheim. It's Big Blue Button. We used it due to data security. Our university decided not to use Zoom, but this tool, it's more or less the same as Zoom. And we all made the same experiences more or less during the last months. So we could go to the next slide. Yes, these tools, of course, facilitate interactivity. They have those facilities, tools for voting, for example, a chat or breakout rooms. So interactivity is possible, but the question is this really communication? Is this discussion as we imagine it when we are talking about a vivid scientific debate that we want to have in the seminar? Does it strengthen does it strengthen the skills we usually connect with discursive learning? Now we could switch. Okay, so yeah, we have, for example, the voting tool. This is a possibility to introduce some opinions, to trigger some kind of communication, but that's it, almost. Then we have the chat, which is somehow semi-oral, near synchronical, where we could have some kind of quicker argumentation, but due to the parallelism, the concurrency of typing, this makes discussions sometimes very difficult. And then last but not least, of course, we can create some kind of breakout rooms where an oral discussion is possible. But usually the results of these discussions in smaller groups are usually presented by only one person. So the others can loaf socially, so to say. So if we could go to the next slide. No, not one. All these tools have the problem that they are, on the one hand, rather time consuming, and on the other hand, that they pander social loafing. That there's, I had the impression I'm talking always to the same students. This is something I also observe in face-to-face interactions, that there are some very active students who participate and some are rather in the background, but I have the impression the digital environment fosters this behavior. So what I did in this situation, I transferred the communication somehow to a kind of a written dialogue. I tried to define tasks and questions to consolidate and expand knowledge and competencies. And I provided an elaborate feedback. What I forgot during the last months is to consider the workload, my workload and the workload of students. Of course, this kind of communication is also very time consuming. So we all had a lot of work to do during the last months. And we could go. So I would like to show you just two small examples. What we did during a seminar with the title Language and Migration. And on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see one task where we were talking about language and identity. And the task was to find similarities in the bios of famous personalities, and to ask oneself what this says about a social view on identity. And the students were very happy with this kind of task. I got very good results with that. And the second is an example where I worked with so-called language portrayals. There, the students should think about the languages they have yeah, the languages that belong to them, and they should find a part in their body where this language is situated. For example, a language in which they dream, a language in which they talk to their parents, and this might be in the heart, in the brain, wherever. And afterwards, they should think about the possibilities this kind of biographical questioning could give in research. And also this task was yeah, adapted very happily by the students. They made great effort with that. To come to some kind of common ground, of course, also in time of social distance, students want to talk or to write, but I have the impression they rather write than talk. And they need some kind of personal connection or some motive or source as a practicable and applicable point of departure to go to abstraction and research orientation. And now Milica will show you some more, some other examples and theoretical background to that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, I would like to give an example based on my seminar, Analysis of Educational Communication in Second Language Learning Context. The seminar was conceived as a project seminar with the goal to analyze the interaction in the digital classroom context via Zoom during COVID and to formulate empirically-based suggestions for further optimization. An important aspect was to promote analytical skills, communicative reflection, the adaptivity of prospective teachers, as well collaborative as problem-solving orientation and argumentative skills related to making interactive and communicative decisions, and above all, to compensate for the stressful lockdown atmosphere through an active problem-solving oriented action in the social integrated space of the seminar, providing emotional and effective relaxation. Now, I would like to...
Ich hatte ein Problem, ich bin mir nicht sicher, ob Sie das gehört haben, was ich bisher nicht.
Doch?
Doch, okay. Dann ist es irgendwie ein Problem jetzt in der Zwischenzeit mit Video, mit dem Hosting. Aber gut, ich mache das
also
mal.
Ich konnte es gut hören.
Okay, gut, dann, okay, sorry. Ich habe irgendein Problem. Ich sehe gerade, es ist stopping. Ja. Ich habe gerade ein Problem.
Olga, I think your micro is off.
Ich habe gerade ein Problem.
But you have now to stop this presentation because it's already over 10 minutes again. And but I think we saw the main topics of interaction in online teaching. It's one of the main problems, I think, from all of us. And I think we could have these presentations for all in something. Do you have a tool, to put the presentations in, or we can do this on NTEP website as well?
So, no, we can continue now with the next.
Okay, then we go. Okay, yeah.
Okay, that means that I should not present anymore, so I can just. So yes, okay.
Yeah,
good.
yes, Milica.
Okay,
the
okay. Thank you.
over. There was an issue of preparing the presentations for 10 minutes, and in fact,
yes, that is the reason it was blocked. Okay, sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, then we have this next again from Russia. It's from Penn State University, Tatiana Glatova, about transition to online learning at Penn State University. And I hope she's online because I don't see her.
She was.
Tatiana?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
So we continue with.
Okay, it's now Kazan again. It's not Penza, but.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Tatiana Zavelina, and I'm representing.
Excuse me, it's the same. Excuse me, it's the same problem as it was. We don't hear because of the background noise. I don't know what it is, but it's impossible to hear. And therefore, I think we go now better to Penza, Tatiana Glatova from Penn State University.
Can you hear me now?
No, it's not possible. But really, it's the noise is awful. It's impossible to hear you. Tatiana, I mean from Kazan. Could you go out that we now have from Penza? We have now the presentation from Penza.
Yes.
But
can you see me?
Yes.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we are
yeah, the
watching now
presentation
Tatiana
is
Zlotova presentation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's okay. So now Tatiana Glotova from Penza State University.
Yeah, Tatiana Glotova, and our presentation, Tatiana Glotova and Tatiana Razuvaeva, and when we will discuss the transition to online learning in Penza State University and challenges and perspectives. On 16 March 2020, Minister of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation recommended that higher education institutions shift to online learning owing to extraordinary situation. And from 17 March 2020, all classes and our university in Penza State University have been switched to the online mode. We don't have time to adapt it. We have to switch. The transition made the application of e-learning elements and distant technologies relevant, ranging from the use of specific software tools to online learning methods. And we have some problems, a lot of problems, and insufficient technical support, inadequate access to quality internet, need to quick selection of software tools for video conference, insufficient performance of our university virtual learning environment due to the increased load of students and teachers, uneven quality of software for organizing video conference for large groups of students. And for teaching methods, need to modify management strategies and methods of conducting classes, lectures, practical classes, laboratories, increase demand to quality educational content for students to explain, especially to practical and laboratories classes. Management of feedback of students, need to new methods to obtain it. Difficulties in monitoring teaching and learning exams, term papers, and graduation thesis defense. A lot of problem, and how we decided. The Department of Strategic Development and Quality System in our university conducted the survey on the quality of online learning in April-May 2020. The most interesting were the answer to the question, what do students lack in interaction with teaching staff? And the following two answers were the most common. The opposite answers. I do not have enough face-to-face communication, and another, everything and fine. And it shows that some students, half of students like distance education, and half of students don't have face-to-face communication. And what questioned the survey discussed? Quality of teaching and learning materials, interaction with teaching staff, quality of guidelines and other documents to understanding of requirement and action, technical support for online learning, forms of interaction between student and teaching staff, change in the amount of workload after transition, and desire to take some classes remotely and use distance technology after self-isolation. And the answer for the question, what the student lack in the interaction with teaching staff, we show you, and we can divide to three groups, to three sections. The first is the answer to technical support and connection quality. You can see it's depend of quality internet and quality some software tools. The second group of answers on learning management and evaluate the learning materials and quality of learning materials. And you can see these answers. Practical materials and visual aids, learning materials, skills. And third group is answers on online learning, organization and management of online learning. And we can see that students need personal presence, communication, and good communication in the video mode, and additional explanation for distance mode. And I have to say that in our university have a system, a virtual learning environment since 2016. It contained information on the all disciplines, student groups, student academic performance, and exam results. And we have in our learning environment a lot information for student, and you can see the page of my page in this system. With using this system, teaching staff are able to upload necessary teaching and learning material, measure and test student academic performance, monitor student academic performance and receive report on learning activities on student, and collect the student works. And you can see the page for teachers and the possibilities. The student are able to, with learning environment, run self-study and test assignment, take pass-fail exam, present paper and project in the electronic forms, work in the news and advice forums, access discipline programs, learning materials, lecture presentation, etc. This slide shows us the example of one of discipline course, online course for student, annotation program, some document, and the beginning of the course. The system, our university have a special YouTube channel for to help our teachers in transition to distance learning. And you can see the page of this channel. And in spring, autumn 2020, there are some live streams, transition to online learning, in question and answer of on-mount conference that used for distance learning in social nets for very big groups of students. Testing in university virtual learning environment, electronic dean's office, electronic signature and signing of documents, and some webinars. It's for State Examination Commission secretaries and State Examination Commission secretaries management graduation. And we discussed some software for video conference and webinar. And I have to say that this channel helped to teacher in this very fast transition. And I have to show you our experience and discuss this question, show my course baccalaureate cycle, computer science, the first academic years. The student of the first academic years was very difficult transition to distance learning. And when I organized the online course, it's very like to school, to secondary school. We use various forums, surveys, tests, assignment, and group activity was implemented in Zoom in synchronized mode with use video conference, audio conference, and the team project were defended in public with Zoom possibilities. The student make presentation, demonstrate the development application, role-playing game for defended the project, and discussant project. I have to say that the discussant project in online mode, it was successfully, and student have the student have a good project and show a lot of good project. You can see the page the part of page for student one lesson for first year student with use of our university environment with LMS Moodle. Another example of experience is computer data processing structure and algorithm, the second academic year. And
Tatiana, it's the same, so you have to finish your presentation.
And the second, the good experience with seminar, the good experience with master is very good experience. And we use Google Meets for defended. We have a good experience in discipline literary text analysis. I have to say, with the good experience with program to teaching staff, with our program for NTEP program for our teacher. And you can see these papers. The result of our transition and our message. I can say that students have a good feedback with teaching staff with online possibilities, but teaching staff have increased workload and limited time to give instant feedback to students. It was a lot of work for teachers to give that answers, the good back. And I would to say that the first academic year have a most problem, and the master have a good was successful transition. and what essential, what we need in now. I think that we have used distance experience of this very difficult term with online term, and what we need automate assessment of learning outcomes, monitoring on acquiring knowledge, skills, and abilities. We have to develop employing various methods to give feedback of student, and this depended of learning outcomes and discipline content. And we have designed interactive software tools for practical trainings, web services, interactive simulation, virtual laboratories. And we need the most need these three things. Yeah.
Okay.
And I thank you for your attention. And it's great to see you here. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. It's every time good to hear that someone has good experiences and shows us what possibilities there are to change in these good experiences.
Thank you.
And now we are going from Russia to Italy, to University of Bologna. And Marta Ilardo told us a little bit from the experiences of the Department of Education Studies, University of Bologna, in our times of pandemic. Hello?
Hello.
Okay, we see your presentation. Hello, Marta.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for invitation. Thank you, Susana Gonzalez and Rui Costa for participation at this conference. So I hope to be very quickly in my presentation, and I would like to present the experience of the Department of Educational Studies of my University of Bologna. And in particular, I will to refer to the positive aspect of our experience in order to understand what we have learned from this experience. So the main question guide developed during the time of pandemic by our university was how help the educational community. This question is an educational question, I think, because aims to explore needs, but at the same time aims to promote change and transformation, and is a way, obligation way. We know well in this month our creativity, we have used our creativity with the moral obligation to continue to be a community. And the future now is indeterminate, and under this condition, our objective is redefine the active synthetic skill of designing a desirable future and inventing ways of bringing about. In this direction, the Department of Bologna have proposed and developed in this month two principal ways in order to support the problematic situation of Italian educational system in particular. One side have been promoted some action research, and another side some reflective activity oriented to explore new needs or possible lackness. Regarding the first way, the department has created a digital space where was possible to investigate what we know as problem setting. I mean, problem setting in literature is a process of inquiry relevant to identify the problem itself. So what is the problem? What is also the possible resolution? in order to implement this objective, many research groups organized two kinds of training support for teachers. The first was addressed to teachers of primary and childhood school with webinar, throughout webinar, seminar intervention, in order to collect questions and problems. And obviously in order to listen the voice and opened spaces for listen the voice of the teachers. The opportunity to participate at this training was the occasion to generate a new understanding of the phenomena and to focus change in the situation. We know that when someone reflects in action, he becomes a researcher in the practice context and maybe could elaborate a new theory of the unique case like has pandemic time. The second training was addressed to the teacher of higher education, to professor. And in this case, all of us have learned how to promote with interactive tools, how also conservated relationship. So in this case, the principal aims was try open opportunity and offer practical solution. It's clear that in this specific case, now we are in the era of problem solving and not of problem posing. The second the second important proposal from our department that I nominate exploring and reflecting started from the desire to offer a contribute to the community, but also the community out of the university. So all the educational community, school spaces, urban spaces. And in this case, we have produced a report where we collected the article by each partner of a Center for Educational Studies on Children and Families. And this report is today public in our website, if you are interested. And we can find it reflection about topic like childhood and pain, digital inclusion, and social inclusion, etc. In order to conclude, what we have learned from each other and what we have learned from the situation. Yes, I speaking only about positive aspect because as I said at the beginning, this contribution aims to illustrate what we have learned. So I can nominate the opportunity, for example, to coming out our skills and the challenge of the future about, for example, the opportunity offered by a blended learning model that we need to explore now from today. Thank you very much for attention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marta, for your good ideas and interesting topics you told us. And now we are going to my university. It's the Technical University of Dresden. And in the first presentation was already mentioned the Opal platform. It's a platform for learning. And Svetlana Wisniewska, who is dealing a lot with this Opal platform, will present us, because I think it's a very interesting possibility for e-learning. So it's not very loud. Yeah, we see the presentation, but we
yes, we cannot hear. Yeah.
We cannot hear. It's
And now it's better?
Very
no,
low,
better.
very low.
Very, very low.
And now?
It's the
same.
same problem. I don't know if we should go to the next speaker and then Miss Svetlana makes a test, the sound tests before.
Okay.
Or
try again,
again.
Svetlana, and
Okay, I'm trying, sorry.
Yeah, it's very low again.
Okay, it's very low. So then we switch to myself,
yeah,
and go back then to this Opal. So now
So Svetlana, please make the test of sound with your micro off, but you can make the test of sound and share with me so I can help.
So I hope you see now my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so I have a very special topic. It's about historical linguistics. It's one of my topics in teaching. And historical linguistics are a very traditional field. And now we had to switch to online teaching. And I have to say, firstly, that I have rather good experiences with that. So students were more involved than other times in this topic. I have to say it's only the course is called All Slavic Languages, and it's from the pre-literate and to proto-literate periods, from early Slavic alphabets, and then Old Church Slavonic, Old East Slavonic, and Old West Slavonic. And you see, no, it's more or less from the 7th or 6th century before our era and up to the 16th century. So it's a very long time. And you have for all this, and it's the West Slavic languages, Eastern Slavic languages, and South Slavic languages. So it's and all in one semester. It's more or less an overview with grammar, some text, and a lot of cultural and historical background. So what we are doing now? Firstly, I have to say, we have some traditional methods. I wrote a script. This is every year it will be renewed, but it's a written script with papers, literature, and so. And we have this online as a PDF, so very traditional. And then we have some presentations, like now in Zoom presentations, like the grammar of Old Church Slavonic. And we have more papers in these fields. There's a little book about the slaves in Middle Ages. And all this we have on the online learning platform. So it's available for students there. I have to say, this is what we had before, already before the Corona crisis. But now what students are doing, they work on exercises in the script, sending me, and then we are talking about them during our Zoom meetings. We have big blue button and Zoom. It's all possible for us in lessons. And then they have presentations. And what's very interesting in what my experience is, that in their presentations in Zoom, they integrated more film clips and other material into the presentation. So I didn't tell them, but they were more creative because maybe they know that now we are on this platform, now we are on internet, now we are only in distant learning, and we gave more interesting material. And they developed riddles which are solved then in the chat. And the most important point is that students work with websites. So I give you an example for a riddle, which place and which area hides itself behind the Sorbian names. Sorbian languages, it's languages of a minority close to slave minorities close to Jason. So they are living there since the 7th century before our times. And so for a long time, and they have a special Slavic language, the Sorbian. And we have a lot of towns and villages, and all the names are slaves, Slavonic names. And so you see then there's Kamenitsa, Budishin, Žitava, and so on. And you have to say what is behind this. So behind Kamenitsa, Chemnitz, it's the town Chemnitz, and it's from stone. Budischen, Bautzen, the German name. It's a village from a man called Budich. And Žitava, Zittau, it's a German name. It's from Žito, from grain location. So these we are dealing with these riddles from they're developed from the students within the chat, with what is more or less active, I have to say. And but the most interesting thing is that you can work with websites in historical linguistics. For instance, a very interesting website is for the birch bark documents from Novgorod. You have to know that in Novgorod, beginning with the 10th century up to the 15th century, you have a lot of texts written on birch barks. And there was a whole culture, and this is all these birch barks and the text within everyday text. So about dealing, about some personal notes, and so on. And you have huge of this, and you can see this on a special website from Russia. And you see them very well, and you have translations, and you have variations and mispunctuations, and only photographs and so on. And students are working within the classroom in Zoom with these websites, and that's in my experience was every time very active. Another example is from a document of South Slavic languages, but in the German-spoken context, and that's one of the first Latin, or most of the first Latin written Slavonic paper, and it's church texts, and it's preaching and so on, and there you have the same with this, like with these birch barks. But what is very interesting here, that you can hear how the text should spell. You see here all these points, and when you are give a tip on this point, then you have the text you can hear the text. What is very interesting. So there you have also different versions of transcriptions as well, like with a Birchback document. And so, students are working all the time with these websites, and that's, for my side, was the most interesting experience. In principle, you can do this in the classroom in presence with PowerPoint presentation and projection, but you can do this in this Zoom classroom as well, and there it was very interesting and very active. So that's from my experiences how to work with given websites in historical linguistics in online teaching. Thank you so much for listening. And now we we are going now back to Svetlana, because I said all this is available also on our Opal platform, and maybe we can hear now about this Opal platform.
Thank you, Olga. I think Svetlana already solved the problem. So please, Svetlana, can you connect now? No.
And now I change.
Yes.
Oh yeah, now it's good. Yes, show your presentation.
Two microphones and it's.
Okay, we can switch our volume a little bit louder.
Okay.
So. Okay, hello once again. I would like to give you a very small presentation about our Opal learning platform at the TU Dresden. So I will speak about these points. What is Opal platform? How to log in? What do I find in Opal platform? User interface and navigation. Search and find content, work in courses and in groups, and can I use Opal without university account? It means SATHE account, the account of TU Dresden. What is Opal? Opal is the online platform for academic teaching and learning. It is a central learning platform of the TU Dresden and other Saxon universities. It can be used by all members who belongs to the institution TU Dresden or some other universities in the Saxony region, or our big library in Dresden also. You can find the access to the platform via this link, bildungsportalsachsen.de. So how to log in? If you type in your browser the link to the Opal platform, you will find such a window with some institutions which belongs to the users of the platform. Then you can choose, for example, TU Dresden, click in and then log in, and you are in on the platform. What can you find on our learning platform? So there are many information, many materials, many courses and working groups which you can participate in. You can make enrollments to the courses. You can participate in learn and working groups, which also belongs to some courses. The screenshot shows you one example of the course, for example, e-learning at the TU Dresden. It means that course is situated on the platform, and it shows you the e-learning tools that we have at the TU Dresden and which you can find on the platform, and some information about using of the tools, about the same tool Opal. Learning platform Onyx, it's a test tool for preparation of exams, for example, or some tasks online. The second one is Opal exam. Then we have also Magma, its video platform. InVote, its live questionnaire tool. Lime Survey it's also online questionnaire tool. Adobe Connect, it's for virtual classroom, and Pick Blue Button. User interface and navigation. What you see now, it's a desktop view of opened window in the Opal platform, and it consists of 3 sections. The first section is here. It's the main menu. Here you can find homepage window, teach and learn icon, and catalog. The second section is here in the middle of the window of the slide. It shows you, for example, your which courses you are attending courses, or your favorite courses, or for example the groups you are participated in. And the third section of that Opal window is here with general information about data privacy, terms and conditions, some latest updates, and so on. So some words once again to the user interface. This menu icons, if you click on the homepage, you can personalize your homepage using some portlets and changing information about your personal information, or it will show you the courses you are participating, your groups. If you click here, teach and learn, you will find courses and also groups in which you are active. Then catalog, here you can find all the overview of all the courses which are on the Opal platform. You can click searching functions so that you can find a course to some special topic, some special issue. I'll show you it a little bit later. And e-teaching course, it's an example for a separate tab. If you have some courses in your homepage, you can click on, and then you'll see a course in a separate window. Yeah, and in this part are some settings and the name of user. Here is the searching box. So here I have I show you a screenshot of one more example, how you see the structure of the platform. So in the tab Teach and Learn, you see on the left menu here is the interface of the Opal, of my personal Opal. So which courses I have as favorites, my courses, my supervising courses, or courses which I'm tutoring, or some active courses, closed courses. Also my groups, tutoring groups, participating, waiting lists, and my e-portfolio. Then here are some tools for creating course, or creating course with a wizard, import some courses, create a group, create learning content, import learning content, e-portfolio, manage owners. In this part, you can, for example, give someone else administrative rights for a course that you created, and so on, and task pool. If you click here in the menu on the catalog, you can search for amount of courses for to different topics, and that's an example at the Opal TU Dresden humanities field, and here you can see some separate faculties, and if you click on one of that faculties, for example, faculty of linguistics, literature, and cultural studies, you will find all the courses that we have on the faculty. Then it is one example how you can search for some topics, for some courses. If you put in the searching field, for example, chocolate, it's an expanded search results. You will see here all the courses, all the topics responded to that word you put in here. So it's not difficult to find something that you are searching for some reasons for your other courses and so on, for some materials. And if the courses are free for without password or something else, you can see all the courses here. If some course is safe with password, then you should of course have this password to find it. Here is example how to enroll to the course. A course name is this course linguistics, and it says it's opened in a separate tab here, and to enroll in this course you just need to click here, enroll, and if there are some free places, you are in course. For example, here we see that 43 people are enrolled, and all the places together are 44, so one place is left. And here you can see the sessions, that's separate sessions in the summer semester. As an example for you to see, you can click each of these sessions and see what is put here as information, or some files, or some descriptions, videos, and so on.
Okay, Svetlana, we are already running out of time. So
okay.
I think
okay, just last sentence about using Opal without university account. Maybe it's interesting for other people. It means that if you don't belong to our university, to Dresden or some other Saxony universities, there are some possibilities here to take part, so to use Opal platform. You just need to connect our SATHE service desk at the TU Dresden, and then to find the possibility you can use the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Svetlana.
Svetlana. Rui, can we try? We are already at 6:30, but maybe we can try for another 10 minutes again. Tatiana from Kazan, is it possible?
No, she's not here.
She's not here.
I spoke with her in parallel through another device, and the noise was continuing, so it was impossible.
Okay.
She didn't have it. So she apologized, but
okay,
she could not understand what was the problem.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So
but for all, yeah.
Yes.
We couldn't hear anything because of the noise in the background. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So I think
okay, then Okay.
Now, so I want to thank you all, the speakers, mainly Holger, the coordinator of the INTEP project, where the Polytechnic Coimbra participates through its Teaching and Learning Center, CINEP. Also want to thank all the participants. We had a really international experience with speakers from UK to the border of Europe and Asia. From Ekaterinburg, we heard Marina, and we had opportunity to confirm all the difficulties we have are common to all other countries. And we also had the opportunity to listen to some initiatives, efforts that are made to overcome these difficulties. So, thank you all. Não, agora falarei um pouco em português, só para dizer que têm certificados que podem fazer o download, estão no chat, portanto podem fazer o download e colocar o vosso nome, se assim entenderem. E queria convidar-vos então a assistir aos workshops da manhã, que têm variados temas que vão desde software que está a ser desenvolvido para avaliação online até ao debate é o que termina a sessão sobre o ensino superior em transição. Portanto, obrigado pela vossa participação. Qualquer questão que tenham, podem colocar agora também no chat em termos de organização ou posteriormente enviar para o e-mail do CINEP, se assim entenderem. Tá? Muito obrigado a todos, então, e até amanhã. Esperamos voltá-los a ver-vos todos amanhã, às 2 horas, que amanhã começa mais cedo. Muito obrigado, então.
Obrigado, boa tarde.
Obrigada.
Até amanhã.
Boa tarde.
Boa tarde a todos. Até amanhã.
Boa tarde.
Aguardamos.
Thank you so much.
Palmas. Sentimos. We missed the clap on presential meetings, right? So. Okay, thank you all. And we see each other later on other events.
On my side, thank you to the colleagues from
yeah, thank you all that we had the opportunity to participate in your conference. I think it's a great conference, and I wish you all luck and another good day the next day, and good papers and publications after the conference. So thank you so much.
We'll have. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, and bye.
Bye. Bye.
Ainda temos aqui muitas pessoas online que não querem sair, querem ficar já para amanhã, não é?
Estamos a ver o fundo verde da vossa apresentação.
Pois é, José, então...
Tudo bem?
Tudo bem, tudo bem. O José já tem este fundo verde também para amanhã?
Não, mas tenho uma coisa engraçada. É que o senhor, como é que se chamava a Susana, sabe o nome? O primeiro conferencista tem no material que ele partilhou o paleio que eu vou usar amanhã. Exatamente. O mesmo autor, a mesma fonte e tal, portanto, olha, já estamos a facilitar.
Maravilha, maravilha.
É engraçado, andamos pelos mesmos caminhos. Mas pronto, olha.
É a globalização.
Não, e é realmente o Meyer é um tipo que publica umas coisas engraçadas, já publica há um tempo. Mas pronto, são coincidências. Está tudo bem com toda a gente?
Está tudo bem, tudo bem.
Talvez possamos...
Nós da Comissão Organizadora vamos estar aqui um bocadinho em reunião de avaliação no final do dia de hoje. E
até
agora
fazer
uma operação que é uma limpeza étnica. Todos os que não são da organização. Se é que isso se consegue fazer, tirar aqui, ficarmos só nós, isso é possível. É possível fazer-se isso.
Falta desligar o YouTube, que ainda estamos a transmitir em live.
Ok.